let's continue. And we got a black game. Let's play a Philidor. Oh, it goes knight f3. Never. I guess we're not playing a Philidor. So, okay. Well, let's play d5. And, wow, the Lisitsyn Gambit. That is a very... Now, this is a move. This is called the Lisitsyn Gambit. I'll talk about who Lisitsyn was after the game. Now, we're supposed to take this pawn. And this is a good... let's call it this way. This is a good case study in how to react to gambits. Let's say you've never seen this before. How do we respond to this? Well, we got it. Well, we gotta get a sense of the landscape here, and we gotta understand. Okay, what is the knight doing? Well, he's threatening to take the pawn, and he's putting pressure on f7. Our first priority generally is going to be to develop naturally, and the natural development move is knight f6. He's not threatening to take on f7. We don't need to panic. d3 is a move, but the thing that you gotta hold in the back of your head is that you can always consider giving back whatever was sacrificed. Give it back, but gain something such as an easier position to play. And from a practical perspective, that could be just so liberating rather than trying to cling to the pawn. So let's say we go d3. We start thinking, we say, well, e takes d3 is super tempting, right? But then he's going to play bishop takes d3. And the d file is going to get opened, and I'm going to show you guys after the game all of the traps that exist in that position, and there are many. So let's say that we wanted to play practically, and we wanted to give back the pawn and be very annoying. What move could we play here to do that? This is a bit of an anticlimactic question. We don't need to do anything. We should just let him take the pawn, because then we're going to take his queen, and we're going to get an endgame that's annoying for him. No, you don't need to play h6. See, that's an illusion. We don't need to push him into taking the pawn. If he doesn't want to take the pawn, he doesn't have to. But allow him to take it if he wants to. So e5 is a good move to develop the bishop, but even simpler. Just make a developing move, but don't touch him. Let him do his thing. Yeah, knight c6. Knight c6. Okay, that's a very powerful move psychologically too, because when your opponent plays a gambit, not to overanalyze this, but put yourself in his shoes. Does your opponent want a slightly worse endgame? That is like the last thing your opponent is going to want. So you're using the psychology of gambit players against them. And okay, so he goes knight c3, so he doesn't want to take it. But now that we've developed the knight on c6, we can simply continue developing. And to continue developing, what move seems very effective? Yeah, bishop g4. But the thing is that if he plays f3, then we take on f3, and then the whole point of the move d3 was that we would take the pawn and we would open up his bishop. And if f3, e takes f3, then his bishop, and that's what happens. Look at his bishop. His bishop is undeveloped. Look at his king. Now his entire structure is ruined. And we got to keep our extra pawn. So using this threat of, and we step back, no problem. Using the threat of an annoying position, we totally set him off kilter. Okay, so let's take. And in this position, it makes sense to play more conservatively. I think a lot of you want to go like here, but let's build up a solid structure. There's no need to claim more space. We've already done a lot of good work here. Let's go e6 and develop. Even bishop e7 is good. But on second thought, what would be a more active developing move? I'll talk about this after the game, although e5 was perfectly fine. e5 was perfectly fine, but I'll mention my reasons. Yeah, lovely. Bishop c5. Stop him from castle. Although I would have preferred bishop b4, to be honest. But bishop c5 is good too, because then he's probably going to go here and then try to castle. That would be my guess. And that would actually be... No, knight b5. Wow, this guy is just like... You know, he's really trying. But there is a good way to defend this pawn, and that is to ask ourselves, this knight has departed from c3, so it's no longer controlling d5. Not that we couldn't have gone knight d5 even with this knight here, but now it's even stronger because it defends this pawn. And, well, this knight is now on my nerves, officially, so Get off my back, please, sir. Please go back to c3 so we could continue living our life. He's probably going to go like c4 or something. He seems to be the kind of player who likes to respond aggressively. I feel like or like d4. Okay, no, he goes knight c3. My prophet sense is failing me today. But now he's created, and see, this is another thing that experience tells you. I can sense that he's weakened his position so much that my killer instinct is firing. I'm sensing something. There's too many weaknesses here. And that thought leads you to the thought of, okay, what aggressive moves could I come up with here? And if you look for aggressive moves, you will find one. What does that move look like? Even more aggressive than queen f6. Think about specifically what weak squares he has in his position. Because he's got his pawn on f3, so this is undefended. We could stick a knight in there. But that is a very important follow-up move to this. And we could, yeah, so knight d4 is going to be the follow-up move. And even if the queen is here, he won't be able to take this knight because of the fork. Common concept, right? These two knights positioned in this way. Yeah, and we can still go knight d4, right? And he can't castle either side. The great thing about a knight here is that it prevents him from castling both ways. So his king is held down in the center. And the game is essentially over. I mean, he's just overwhelmed with threats here. Or overflowing with excuses. I'll talk about that, Screws. Let me take down your question. That's a great discussion topic, but goodbye, queen. I think the game will end shortly, and then we'll talk about it. So at my level, much less. Because most of the people I play, I know, or I've played them before. So we know each other well enough where the sort of the psychological tricks go only so far. You choose your openings, yes, based on your opponent's style, but let's castle it to a degree. But it's not a big deal. But at this level, you really do want to get a read on your opponent and who your opponent seems to be. But you don't want to take that too far. You don't want to try to make moves only because you're trying to avoid a certain type of position. Right? You got to be careful where you take the steering wheel. What should we do now? Yeah, knight c4. No, knight c4 earlier was he would just move his king, but now it wins. Okay, so he resigns. See, now it makes sense because we also win the exchange. All right. Okay. So this is the Lisitsyn Gambit. So Georgy Lisitsyn was an international master from the Soviet Union, and he was more known as a chess coach. He also authored a very famous book this is like a classic Soviet chess book from 1952. And the title gets straight to the point. Strategy and Tactics of Chess Mastery. G. Lisitsyn. And it was basically, I loved this book so much that I basically bound it in this binding so it doesn't because this is the original edition from 1952, and I basically read this whole thing. So let me look at the date markers. Let me tell you guys when I read this. 2004. 2004. Yeah. Started 2004, so when I was 8. This was one of my first books, actually. And it's it's 500 pages. It's amazing. I still use it in my lessons. And he covers everything. But Lisitsyn also developed this gambit, which is interesting, but of course very dubious. Which is of course very dubious. But in this position, after e takes d3, bishop takes d3, what white is often going for is a very famous trap. This trap manifests itself after h6. White, it's Russian, of course. White to play and win. I translated the name. White to play and win. And a lot of you guys know this. Knight takes f7. King takes f7. We've talked about this. This is a standoff. The queen is undefended. The king is weak. Bishop g6 wins the queen. But not bishop c4. See, and you got to be careful. Actually, no, bishop c4. King e8, you can do it like this. But here, maybe black can worm his way out with knight d5. But bishop g6 Far more accurate. Okay, but the thing is, like, black can just go knight c6 here, and black is better. But what I'm trying to do is to give you guys a roadmap here for dealing with these scenarios. So knight c6 is a very powerful move because our opponent is almost certainly rolling his eyes. Because objectively speaking, he should probably do something like this. Yeah, Tennison is another name for it. But does a Gambit player want to play this position where his king has lost its castling rights, and we can go like here and then castle and then fianchetto? We've got a great position. This is equal from an objective standpoint. But nobody wants to play this if he's playing a list that's in Gambit. So that would be a good example of harnessing the psychology smartly. We're not doing anything extreme. We're just offering back the pawn. All right. I don't know if that makes sense. So again, you don't want to take this too far. If they're playing some crap and they're giving up their pieces, you don't want to say, well, Daniel said, I don't want to take the pieces that are offered to me because Gambit players like that. Well, no, you want to exercise your judgment. But if you have a sense that your opponent is some trickster and he's playing some Gambit and you've never seen it before, always consider giving up whatever has been sacrificed in order to get a simplified position of some sense. All right? Let me give you guys one more example of this. In the traditional Black Mardiamer Gambit, that's d4, d5, e4, d takes e4. Now, the sort of quote-unquote revised move is knight c3. But the old move is to play f3. And when this was first shown to me by I am John Donaldson, thank you, Edward Osborne Wilson. Well, that's the whole point, GGC. Yes, Captain Obvious. Black can play the move e5, which is a great example of this. You're actually like offering back the pawn, but you're getting the same type of annoying position for white, which you would be getting in the list that's in Gambit. So rather than taking on f3, you're offering back the pawn. So you guys should see the point here. Okay? So knight f3. Okay, so let's continue. He decided to insist on it. E.M. Andrews, thank you. But at this point, the whole Gambit has lost its meaning because the d file has remained closed. Okay, so GF is, of course, a further mistake he should take with a knight and limit further damage to his position. And people were wondering why I didn't play e5. Why? Yeah, I could have. No, it doesn't matter. Bishop h5 is perfectly fine here to keep the pin. Doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. And I should preface this by saying e5 is perfectly fine. In fact, from a purely... Well, the computer prefers them both equally. Okay, just for your information. But why did I play e6? So, to answer this question, we have to understand why people are tempted to play e5. Because you're taught to grab the center and claim the space. But it's a question of need, right? Do we need control over the center with a pawn? Because when you push a pawn 2 squares, you are, by definition, weakening more squares than when you push it 1 square. So what I mean by this is white could go bishop g5, and look at this d5 square, for example. You could see a scenario where white sticks a knight in there, right? When you play e6, you keep more of these squares open for your pieces. And this relates to what I said about the pawn storms, right? You want to let your pieces do a lot of the heavy lifting. And maybe I want to put a knight here. Maybe I want to put a bishop here and attack h2. So even though we're getting less space, this is more solid, and we're leaving the center open for our pieces. I hope this makes sense. And it's not like we're not controlling the center. We're controlling some of it, but the center is gone. Like, white is not controlled. The battle isn't taking place over the center anymore. All right? So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, well, bishop g5, we can go bishop e7. No problem. I don't see the problem here. And then we can move the knight away and offer a bishop trade if we want. Or we could not. We could still just go like bishop e4. We're certainly not afraid of this pin, because we could go h6. Yeah. So I think people are understanding this. So here I would prefer bishop b4, actually, but whatever. Knight b5, knight d5 makes sense. Get out of b5. And this is the crushing idea. And again, this is a very common pattern that wins a lot of games, where he can't take this knight because, well, this is a royal fork, right? And he can't even recapture the knight. The last thing is, there's a tendency for some players to just make moves like these because they look cool. He's like, oh, he can't take my knight, look at me. But the cool factor ends after king e2, and you've got 2 pieces hanging, and who asked you to get into that situation? So we only played it here because we're winning the rook, not because we're trying to be cool. Well, I'm always trying to be cool. But it's just who I am, you know. All right. Yeah. Any questions? I can, but why give up a knight? Now you've given up a rook for 2 pieces, right? Which is good for the 2 pieces. Here, we're only giving up 1 piece because... Oh, and this is the famous Tall quote, right? I forgot to mention. You guys probably know it. So Tall famously said, or I'm mangling it, but like, the reason I sacrifice so many pieces is that you can only take 1 piece at a time. This is a great example of that. You can only take 1 piece at a time. So that's the great thing about having multiple pieces hanging. Well, see, and again, let me not deceive you guys. The reason I see this is because I've seen this pattern. It's not because I have some hidden sense. What I have is the pattern recognition. I've seen a gazillion games with this exact configuration of pieces. And if I do a quick chess-based search, and you guys give me about 2 seconds, I can find a million examples sort of this exact kind of tragedy befalling black or white in a game. So here's an example that I just whipped up very quickly. Just one moment. So we are seeing a game between Daniel Dvirny, Grandmaster from Italy, and Mladen Zelic, 2270. So black has just played knight d4, right? So white can't take the knight, right? White can't take the knight because he drops the queen, right? You guys see that? And it looks like black is doing really well. Like, black's doing a much better job exploiting white spin than vice versa. But guess what white does? He takes. Anyway, he sacks his queen. And why does he sack his queen? What is he doing? So what's the follow-up to this? Let's do it one step at a time. Now, if we just take on d1, that doesn't do anything. We're just down a queen for a piece. But we got to look for intermediate moves here. And the intermediate move is, of course, to play knight e6, counterattacking black's queen. Well, black has to move the queen. Where does he move it? He moves it to d7. And now you guys should be seeing the beginning of the pattern we just discussed. So the secondary pattern is, of course, this. But this is not possible because black simply takes the knight. But in chess, you can modify things to your advantage. Bishop takes f6. G takes f6, and here it comes, knight d5. And white is winning here despite being down a piece because black cannot stop the barrage of threats, just like in our game. Even though we are down a queen, it doesn't matter. The knights are so strong when they're occupying these squares. And, okay, black tries bishop e2 out of desperation, distracting the bishop. And he distracts the bishop to play king f7. But now he plays bishop h5 check, and black resigns. Beautiful move. If the king goes back, this is an amazing checkmate. And if he takes on e6, what's white's idea? What's white's idea? No, this is my laptop because I have ChessBase open and all the stream software, so it's taking its toll. Bishop g4, and white ends up a piece. So I'm not sure if black had a way to save more material, but I just wanted to show how commonly these patterns arise. Okay. So I hope this makes sense. And I've never seen this particular game, but what I was trying to show is the sort of abundance of these patterns, and I've probably seen another game with this kind of thing. Okay. Fork overload for sure. Alright, guys. I got 10 gifted there. Let's do one quick encore, and then I'll call it a night. Yeah, you get some of the same patterns from the same openings, but it's not one-to-one correlation. I mean, it's not like every time you play an opening, you get the same stuff. No, my PC is perfectly good, but I appreciate the offer. But I'm satisfied with my equipment for now. This was Dvirny against some guy. The opponents were listed. All right. And preliminarily, thanks to everybody for the massive support for for many, many days now, which I really appreciate it. Hope you guys have been enjoying. My chess has been mediocre lately, but the community has been phenomenal as always. So thanks everybody. Last game here before I call it a night. And let's start our engines. Okay. Let's go e4. Indonesia. Okay. Knight f3. Oh no. I'm stupid. I forgot to play the Danish. But that's okay because, hey, we got to vary our openings anyway, right? So let's play another opening, which I would recommend. I would say to people around 1300 and above, and that's a Scotch Gambit. The Scotch Gambit starts with d4, which is the Scotch, and after e takes d4, knight takes d4 would be the Scotch. The Scotch Gambit is sort of a combination between the Italian and the Scotch. That's the move bishop c4 here. And that looks very weird to somebody who's not seen this before. It's like, bishop c4, like, why are we not taking the pawn? Like, what are we gaining from that? Well, we're putting pressure on the f7 pawn. And the bottom line is that, why did we play d4? We played d4 so that knight f6 could be met with e5. And I'll give you guys the basics afterward. Bishop b4 check is a sharp line. The one precondition here is we have to play very aggressively. And we have to have a good sense of urgency when we're playing this. So bishop d2 here would be too slow. We would allow him to take, and then get his knight out and castle. So we got to throw caution to the wind here and play c3, and take with a pawn with tempo. So yes, we are ruining our pawn structure, and yes, we're depriving our knight of this square. On the other hand, we are gaining tempo. So this is a very instructive moment. Because, yeah, so nice. Bishop f7 and queen d5 check is a tactic that is as old as the hills. Now, shouldn't we start with queen d5? Would be a logical question to ask. Why don't we win a piece by starting with queen d5? He defends with queen e7, very good. And that's a very commonly missed idea, that he can bring the queen out. The queen is very good at doing this, like defending two things at once. Just make sure that you're checking for that when you think you have your opponent in a fork. So first we take here. We don't win a piece, but we do get his king out. And now we pick the piece back up with queen d5 and queen takes c5. And white is better. Not much better, but better. We've got long-term pressure against his king. Okay. Yeah, so actually that's a good idea. I mean, we can throw this check in just to make him either go g6, which would expose him along this diagonal. And why would that be meaningful? Well, because he's going to lack, and kudos, he's going to lack a dark squared bishop. So think about where we might put, what would be a good plan here? Well, what would be a good fob? How do we actually exploit the weakness of that diagonal? Well, first, oh, this is a sexy move for sure. Yeah, bishop h6. I mean, either. Bishop b2 is what I had in mind, and this plan. But now that I think about it, bishop h6 looks phenomenal as well. But let's remember that he can't castle anyway. But if we wanted to be really five-fed, if we wanted to be, like, really restrictive, we would play c4 first so he doesn't play d5. But here we're going to go bishop b2. Because it occurred to me that if he goes d5, we could just take his pawn and then go c4 and attack whatever's on d5 and also his rook. Okay. So remember always that the queen shouldn't always be on the front lines in such an attack. I can sense that a lot of people probably have the temptation to keep the queen on the 5th rank. There's no obligation to do that. Let's drop the queen back to a safe spot where it's protected by this is the personal bodyguard here. Remember, as Hess always likes to point out, the pawn, 2 squares away from the knight, is guarding the 2 key squares that the knight can go to. So we haven't completed, well, we have many good moves here. And the queen, think of the queen, and I like to sometimes compare the queen to like a mercenary. What you want to do is you want to reserve the queen for very specialty tasks. Like, yeah, quickly go after this weak pawn that's been created. But in this case, let's be very patient. Remember, he can't castle. So let's complete our development. Let's not do anything crazy until everything is developed. Let's get our knight out. Let's castle. And now we can start thinking about concrete action. Okay, he's preparing to castle, but he's moved his king, remember. Okay, so we need to make a plan. We need to figure out how we are going to now start exploiting the fact that his king is in the center. Well, fortunately, there's a principle. In such cases, we want to open up the center. Right? Opening up the center is what you're supposed to do when there's a king that is permanently in the center. So, opening the center is quite straightforward here, right? What move eventually do we want to play to open the center? Chasing. And we're not going to play it immediately. We want to play e5, but e5 is premature, and you guys are seeing this, which I love. Because if we play e5, what is he going to do? How is he going to keep the center closed? He's going to go d5. And, okay, we haven't accomplished much. So, our bishop is also inactive, which is another way to approach this. So we first play c4. We control the square with the pawn. And e5 is going to be a whole lot stronger now because the bishop is also going to be again. And we don't even have to play e5. And that's what I refer to as well, not what I refer to as, but this is the concept of flexibility. When you make good, healthy moves, you often find, oh, well, I played this move with this idea, but hey, now I discovered that there's all these other ideas that just emerge naturally. So that's the great thing about playing good, healthy, solid chess. Okay. Well, you need to hold like the control button or like the alt button. They lead to different ones. Okay, queen g4. If you guys don't mind, let's begin by politely asking the queen. Politely but firmly asking the queen to get out of my face. Okay. And now we have a very five-head maneuver, which has nothing to do with our initial plan. And see, that's exactly... Now, how do I see this? Well, I mentioned earlier that when the queen is stuck in no man's land, it can be very susceptible to attacks. And that thought should immediately lead you to knight g5. But what's the follow-up here? Why are we attacking? Where is this knight actually going? This is Frankfurt Airport. We're not staying on g5. Where are we flying to in the end? Yeah, we're flying to f6. We're going to do that by taking on h7 and then going to f6. And that is going to be an absolutely devastating move, whether or not it comes with check. Okay. And it will come with check, and it'll come with a fork. And guess what? Are we going to rush to take this rook? No, because this knight is so incredibly strong as an attacker that it might be worth not taking the rook, but rather keeping the knight here because it is restricting the king from coming back to d7. In fact, that's exactly what we're going... Well, it is tempting to take the rook. So, there's many ways to approach this, and many good ideas here. But one of them is actually to pawn storm him. Right? e5, he can still go d5. But there is a very quick little... Yeah, I like f4. Now, he can trade queens here if he wants. Then we're going to take his queen and take his rook, and we're going to be completely winning in the endgame. But if he doesn't, then we're going to play f5. And we are going to force the center open, either by taking g6 or by opening up the e-file. So I hope... Exactly. I'm not regretting my words. I will not apologize. Yes, let's go. f5 check. He's probably going to... Okay, knight f5 is just collapsed now. We just thank you for the knight. I mean, now we take his knight, and we're crushing him too. And we're now going to... This is a double check, by the way. So, you know, the funny thing is, there is the Zen move here. Do you guys want to play like a Zen master? If you want to play like a Zen master, you don't take on g6. Okay? Amazingly, there's another move. So the way that my brain works is I see... The first thing I saw when I looked at this is I really want to give him a check here. I really want to give him a check here because that would send the king right in the path of the bishop. There'd definitely be some sort of a checkmate there, right? But that's not a great move right now because he can take our queen, right? So queens are easy to deal with. We can chase his queen. But if we go rook ac1, be very careful about considering what squares have been left behind. He can go queen takes a2. Well, that's too bad. Can we improve that idea to disallow that? Yeah, rook fc1. And that looks like such an awkward move. But it makes sense, right? I hope the logical chain there makes sense. Thank you, Swiftier. He's going to move the queen. We're going to give him a check, and a checkmate on g6 is how I think the game is going to end. Well, he's going to help us along. Okay. Well, it doesn't really matter, actually. I actually was not wrong. That's the funny thing. King g7. Oh, God. 1290. That's not good. Yeah. Okay. So the Scotch Gambit is one of those old school openings that is actually still good. And again, the point is, if black plays knight f6, we go e5. But those of you in the know will know that d5 here is the main theoretical move. Now, I'm not going to, again, I don't have enough energy to go into the details right now. But the bottom line here is that after dc, bc, already black needs to be very careful. I think bishop a5 is actually the only legitimate move here. And this almost transposes into an Evans Gambit. Because, and this is a trap to remember, if he plays bishop e7, white is already winning on the spot. Thank you, Dalpy, for the prime. Oh, queen f6 is better? That's positive. Maybe. I'm not up to date on the theory, by the way. Because after queen d5... Whoa. Well, after queen d6, that is the Gambit on steroids. He has no defense against queen takes f6. I mean, he can play knight h6. In fact, he has to. But now white is simply up a piece. So, I mean, this will happen very often at 1500 level as people will give a check, which is understandable. They want to develop a tempo. But then they'll get in very big trouble in this position. Now, at this point, I think I explained everything. Queen h5 is very accurate. And then bishop b2, opening the diagonal. Everything we did was very straightforward. We developed, we played c4 to prepare e5, but then we exploited the newfound powers of the bishop and the vulnerable situation of his queen to get our knight to f6. Now, rather than sort of myopically taking the rook, we said, well, the knight is very strong here. Let's try to squeeze more out of the position. So we played f4, and we played f5, and finally we came up with this idea of rook fc1, which forces the queen away from its defense of e6. So it didn't matter where he went. This would have been mate anyway. Knight h5, double check. He has to go here or to h6, and queen takes g6 is checkmate. And that is all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I'll see you guys later. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe and stay sane. And I'll see you guys later. All right. Bye.